Okay, and so our last talk of the day is more on the community side. So as part of Steve's talk, he talked about the collaborations workshop of getting together communities of researchers and developers to talk about the different problems here. And Mahendra Mahey, I pronounced
yep,
that
that's
right,
correct.
yes, from the University of Bath and CSI, we're talking about community of developers, and so
okay.
I'll send you Mahendra.
Okay, thanks for staying till the end. Still here. I'll try to be as quick as I can because I'm standing before the pub. So apologies if some of you have seen this presentation before. I've added some new slides, so keep watching. So my name is Mahendra Mahey. I'm the project manager of a project called DevCSI. If you want to remember the program on TV where murders happen, that's maybe a good way to kind of remember it. It's based at the University of Bath. It's JISC funded. I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to talk about developers in higher education, the project, and hopefully trying to finish at the end working together if I can whiz through my slides. So probably need to focus on me because I've got loads of slides. Okay. First bit, just a bit of background about the project. The project's 3 years old. We started it about 3 years ago when things were looking quite gloomy, and basically one of the arguments for setting up the project was that especially when there's downtime, times of austerity looming, that's when a lot of innovation happens. If you look historically, there's a lot of innovation that happens. So we tried to connect innovation and developers, and you'll see how we did that. Okay. Who are the developers that we support? How many of you declare yourselves as developers? Just stick your hands up. Okay, it's about half of you. Okay, so the developers that we support are people who are working and studying in higher education. How many of you working and studying in higher education? So I said more of you, and also some in further education. Okay, some developer types. Opportunistic developers, people who maybe didn't start out as developers but who kind of learnt it as they went along because they had to, maybe researchers who, God, I've got to learn how to program this. How many of you would dare to put yourself in that category? Okay, it's good, brave of you. Kind of classify these kinds of people as maybe people who wouldn't declare officially that they're developers. Maybe they're researchers, librarians, students. Maybe they've done some software carpentry, so a plug to Steve's course. A researcher who needs to identify a problem and solve it. They can't get a developer in, so they have to learn programming themselves. Then you've got sort of more formal definitions. Software engineer, usually works in a team, usually to a set of requirements. The last two are the kinds of sort of invented terms which we're trying to kind of promote. One is the connected developer, so a developer who works in an organization but is connected to others in their community. So this is a community, you're connected to each other, but also wider. The other term is a strategic developer. Have you ever heard that term before? The strategic developer? We just made it up, okay. This is the idea of a developer being of strategic importance to the institution, okay. Really, really important to the institution as part of the research strategy, part of the technical innovation strategy. I'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. So, the life of developers tend to be on short-term contracts. You can stick your hands up if you want to about that one. Project funded. Sometimes seen as, I'm being controversial here, okay, seen as expendable by some organisations. You can just outsource it, can't you? You just don't need developers. Lack of career structure. They sometimes have to leave what they love in academia to go and work for, let you complete that sentence. And in times of austerity, one of the things we were arguing was that developers are the first ones to be cut. What we were trying to argue was that developers are critical towards technical innovation in organisations. Okay, And what institutions need to remember or have a vision for is that technical innovation is a strategic resource and it needs investment. And what we were arguing was that developers play a critical role in technical innovation, especially in times of austerity. Institutions need to hang on to their developers because developers play a critical role in innovation. It's easy to identify that when you outsource stuff it has a cost, but doing stuff in-house has a cost as well. You need to invest in it. And what we were arguing essentially was that if you outsource all your innovation, all your development stuff, you're reducing the capacity for an institution to be innovative. It's quite sort of important arguments. So a couple of other things about developers. Okay, they tend to work vertically. Okay, this bit here in their niche areas, but they rarely work horizontally across their subject domains. Okay, you can see some smiles and grins there. And what we saw was a kind of a gap in the market. That what about getting developers from different domains together at events? So developers, say C++ programmers, but working in completely different domains, getting them to share ideas, experiences from their own domains together, work on little fun projects. You'll see a bit more about that in a minute. So the Dev CSI project was born 3 years ago. Those are the three things you probably need to remember if you don't remember all the other slides. Basically focused on developers working in HE and a bit in FE. There aren't that many developers in FE. It focuses on local innovation that happens within universities. And what we believe is that a community of connected developers, i.e. developers sharing stuff with each other, sharing experience, code, knowledge, is a resource. I didn't realise there was an animation there, sorry. So I'm just going to quickly go a quick historical whiz through, okay. So the first thing we do a lot of is if you want to form a community, you have to have events. You need people to meet, okay. It's great fun organising developer events because they're not traditional sort of academic events where you stand up and talk to people like this, sorry. They tend to be very informal, very fun, lots of doing and making stuff because that's what most developers want. They're kind of driving this. There's playful, so a lot of playing with stuff. There's a spirit of openness, and again I'm being a bit controversial here, okay? Spirits of openness and sharing, often not found in other areas of academia, okay? We have challenges, prizes, and also importantly, recognition amongst peers, okay? A lot of developers feel they don't get recognition for their work, but getting that recognition from their peers, from other universities, for example, is something really important. The other thing that we wanted to do was to make sure that the events were free. That's just a quick whiz through of events. I'm not going to spend time on that. I'll just give you one. Some of you may have seen this slide. This was the event, the Developer Hell event. Okay. Basically, we organised an event where we got developers to improve their presentation skills, because there's a stereotype about developers not being very communicative. But we didn't tell them that was the actual purpose of the event. We kind of revealed it slowly. But basically, to cut a long story short, they had to give a presentation which was videoed for a minute. Then they were given feedback, and the next day they had to do the same presentation in 30 seconds. And the improvement from one to the other was huge. Okay, and the purpose of that was for developers to even explain to other developers what they did in non-technical terms, which is not always easy. Okay. So some of the events, have you heard of Dev8D? Some of you may have heard of Dev8D. It's an emoticon. The 8 stands for glasses, represents a geek, and the big capital D is a big smiley face. So the original developer, Dev8D, was called Developer Happiness Days, using imagery from Happy Days, the fonts and stuff like that, if you remember that. I'm showing my age here. This is some stuff that happened at Dev8D. That was a DIY Minority Report whiteboard that people made for 100 quid. This is a 3D printer. There's some other stuff. That's another 3D printer. They were looking at an experiment to create a three-dimensional plastic object which was created through the sounds that people made as they were walking through Dev AD, which was quite a clever idea. They didn't actually do it. That was a DIY touch table. That's an Arduino. That's Kinect. That's a flying machine. I think they were trying to hook up a brain band to get a brain band to fly an Arduino. One of the other things is getting developers to get some recognition on their CV. So we organise a lot of international challenges. That's just one of them, which we held in Madrid. I'm going to whiz through some of these slides, sorry, because I haven't got that much time. That's a case study which was trying to show the evidence of the value of developers getting training. A lot of developers aren't allowed out to actually get any training. Okay, this was a quote from a manager saying the value of the developer going on training was this. Okay, going to just whiz through. There's some more events. I said that I would talk about this idea of a strategic developer. I won't spend too much time on this diagram, but got local developer in the middle there. And basically what we're saying is the local developer is well connected to their users. They understand the local requirements. They understand the local context. And sometimes they can do a better job than having it outsourced. Basically, that's all I'm going to spend on that. And one of the things we keep continually arguing is that universities, in order to survive, especially in times of austerity, they need to be investing more in innovation. And what we're arguing is that innovation happens locally, happens in a local context. We believe developers are really important for technical innovation to happen. And there are some ingredients that we've kind of got from various research that we've done about the advantages of developing locally. So you have a much more precise set of user requirements. I'm not saying that's always the case. Okay, a better understanding of the local context. There's a lot of examples of agile methods being used, upskilling of staff to learn new things, saving money, a lot of open source development. Needing space and time for innovation to happen is an important thing. 4 minutes, okay, I'm just going to whiz through a few things here. That's just a bit about local developers having a value. Developers here, this is another thing to say that a lot of researchers are getting attracted to the field of software development. It's something they enjoy, and these are very much skills in demand. A lot of the events that we organise are peers teaching other peers, and in order to justify the events to other funders, we were able to calculate, we were able to save £80,000 worth of training for a lot of the developer event, one developer event that we ran, just to prove the value of what we were doing. This is other developers teaching other developers stuff. We've run a survey last year to look at what other people think of developers. General agreement that local developers have value. So I'm just going to whiz through that. We work with a lot of commercial companies. I'm just going to whiz through this. Sorry, this is quite an important slide. We've got a lot of evidence. We're gathering a lot of evidence of the impact of what developers do. If you have any examples of the work that you've done that you could recognise has some value, please let us know, especially if it's publicly funded. Okay. One study that we've looked at showed there was we looked at an outsourced project and a locally developed project, and there was 29% more user engagement with the in-house project. Okay. Some more events. I'm going to whiz through this because just going to finish off in a couple of slides. We've organised over 40 events. Loads of people have been to them. Loads of institutions. If you want to, we're just organising a survey for all developers across the UK. It's going to include benchmarking information, including salaries. Okay, quite controversial, but it's never been done before. You can win a £200 Amazon voucher or £50 Amazon vouchers, and essentially we want to get a kind of a feel for the state of play of developers in academia. I just want to finally finish on some of the work that we do. One of the things that we do a lot of are hack days, and I'm sure you've participated in hack days. That kind of gives you a story of a hack day. Basically, people spend 2 nights working together, they work in teams, and they develop prototypes. And sometimes completely cross-disciplinary. So you get some really interesting developments. There's just some examples. That's a very recent example. We ran a managing research data event, and some of the developers got together and says, "Well, what works on the internet that you can deal with large files?" So we said BitTorrent. Okay, so they were working on a prototype to use BitTorrent and the SORD2 protocol to handle datasets in institutional repositories. The second example is somebody from the University of Cambridge chemistry department sat next to somebody from the BBC and looked at some visualization software which was applied to BBC programme data, which was originally in a chemistry context and ended up with an EU-funded project. A video caption creator, that was a really cool thing that was developed. Very simple for accessibility, creating a grey-out little plugin, HTML5 for websites. So people who have problems with seeing too much text, it kind of narrows it down. And I just want to finish off here. Basically, as a kind of a plea, those are the kinds of things that we do. I'm going to finish on the bottom few bullet points. We try to work in lots of different communities, okay? And we're desperate to work with artists and musicians and also your community, okay? So I imagine you probably already run hack events and things, but it's an open invitation to be involved. If some of you found any of this interesting, please contact me. We're organising a book sprint very soon, which is basically getting 12 developers in a house for a week, and by the end of the week, they've developed documentation for some open source software. Okay, we're doing the same. We're going to do organising more sprints on open source projects. So if there's a little mini project that you think you'd really like to work on, contact me and we can try to make it happen. Those are my contact details. Thank you very much.
Okay, we've got time for a couple of questions. So, Mahendra, I know you were involved in the collaboration.
I was, yes.
Maybe you could say a bit about where the developer bit comes into there and how the community of developers helps the collaboration work.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we've done for the last couple of years is we've supported 5 developers to go to the collaborations workshop, and part of that is to kind of increase the range of developers that actually go to collaborations workshops. So one of the sort of reasons why we collaborate with the SSI is because part of our community are researchers stroke developers, but there are a whole other group of developers as well. So I think each year we've had a fairly different number of types of developers who've gone to the SSI workshop, but it's just really to increase the user base, the people who are actually being involved. And there's a bit of a crossover. Some of the events that we organise are in the researcher domain, and sometimes they're not. But also getting those two groups together, or different groups together, can be very fruitful and innovative, which is kind of the point of the project.
And so I have one other question, just while you're here, that a number of institutions at different phases go through reorganisations of the developer staff within the institution. So what's happening for us is that things that were based in school-based are becoming institutional-based, even though they might physically be located in schools. Are you ever called on to give advice to institutions as part of that process about how to organise the developers within an institution so that they're most effective? So
we're actually working on that this year. We've set up a managers of developers group, basically people who manage developers, and we're working on creating some materials and some best practice examples. Hopefully those will be kind of available in August. But essentially we're kind of looking at ways to do it ways and mistakes made as well, actually. So it's both. But it's a very interesting group. If there anybody here who sort of manages teams of developers, you want to be part of the group. It's expenses paid. We've met a couple of times. It's really interesting. I think the managers being together and getting their experiences, I think they found very valuable. But what we're trying to do is disseminate that across to the sector. You know, examples of best practice, what's needed in order for innovation to happen. So please feel free to sort of contact me.
Well, if there are any more questions? Okay, if not, well, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.